Welcome, my friends. I wanted to talk to you about a new project, a major project that the Arlington Institute has launched here, or at least exposed in the last week or so, called TransitionNet. And I can best set it up by saying this. The reality that we experience is a product of our consciousness. It's a product of the net consciousness of all of the contributing kind of consciousnesses in the space, I would say, but in particular, our personal experiences are primarily kind of modulated by our consciousness and how our consciousness kind of enters the space. Now, few people know more about how that works than Penny Kelly, who spent a good bit of time in research, literally isolating the mechanism about how consciousness changes, engages the underlying plasma field, and then turns into matter, physical reality. And in the context of what we're talking about, that's the fundamental idea that says that what we all think about is what we get. Now, there's a variation about that. That's principal advocate is Bruce Lipton. And Bruce Lipton argues that your health is completely a function of how you think. And so your ideas, in fact, produce the physical reality, the health that you have and that you experience. And there are, I'm sure, a number of other examples that you could come up with that could build directly the relationship between the physical reality and how you think and what you think about and so on. So if you take that principle and you overlay it into this period of time that we're in, and you say we're in this amazing transition to where not only a new human is going to emerge, but also a new world is going to emerge. And you say to yourself, how do you get from here to there? Then one of the things that, well, let me just say that point, that question is based upon an extremely complex system. The reality we live in is so complex that it baffles our mind. It's above our ability, beyond our ability to effectively make sense out of it. There are so many moving parts and so many things, and there's so much intelligence, and there's things here and things somewhere else, and all kinds of places that are all engaged in this space, that the idea about how you get from here to there is very complex. I mean, it's my business. It's a business about thinking about the future, and how do you systematically kind of think about that and try to narrow down at least possibilities that might come downstream. But at the center of this transition is the net effect of the consciousness of the dominant consciousness that is influencing the emergence of this new world. Because what you've got is this split that's happening, and a new world is emerging on one side, and the old world is going into the toilet or wherever it's going. And so the whole kind of where the game gets played in terms of the things that we're interested in is in this transition to this emergent new world, and how we kind of move from the old world to the new one. And as I've suggested, the kind of the baseline for all of that is how we think and what we think about. And so, as it turns out, apparently, because it's hard to know for sure how some of these things work, but when you get multiple people together that are thinking about the same thing, that is to say their brains are entrained, that they're in the same space, they're generating the same vision, they have the same ideas. What you get is a very powerful geometric, geometrically powerful kind of forcing function or shaping function or manifesting function. I remember that Cryon, on one of the early books of the Cryon books, said that 12 people who are all entrained about a common kind of goal or objective are more powerful and influential than a stadium full, 25,000 something people who are all kind of randomly kind of thinking about the future and kind of working their way toward there. And so what you have here is the basic dynamics are that the presumption is that we are going to get where we're going ultimately. And the question is, do you get there by just kind of randomly getting there, or can you shape this process in a more effective way? And I believe, and we've committed ourselves at the Arlington Institute for years now, to facilitating this transition, and in fact, trying to eliminate as much of the kind of the pain and the randomness and the uncertainty and the other kind of things about this, and literally move ourselves from here to there the most effective and direct way. Now, the way you do that, obviously, is to come up with a vision about what this new world might look like. Now, that seems kind of obvious in the context of this conversation, at least, but I would argue with you that that essentially nobody thinks about that in any kind of a coherent and integral way. I've not seen anybody that had a coherent, any kind of picture about what a new world would look like outside of, the Matrix movie or some kind of science fiction-y kind of things, but nobody has literally approached this in a systematic kind of an organized engineering kind of way and said, how do we get from here to there, and how do we make that happen? And with our understanding that consciousness shapes all of this, and if you get a whole bunch of people together who are all kind of a common image and a common vision about where they're going, that'll have extraordinary implications and impact and power in terms of literally producing that, assuring that kind of a world shows up. Now, that being given, I would suggest to you that unlike, for instance, the beginning of the United States, where a relatively small number of men got together and ginned up, came up with, Thomas Jefferson and others, came up with the whole concept of how this world, this country would be formed and what the principles would be and so on. And by the way, I suggest that might have been the most efficient and effective way to do it at that time, given the general education and the other kind of stuff of that period of time. But this time is different, and you're not going to get a relatively small group of people who are all going to generate and produce kind of the picture, the image, the idea of what this new world is going to be. I mean, you could, but the idea, the likelihood that it would be effective is because of the complexity of things right now. It's far more complex than what the world was like back in 1776, and so the presumption that any one person or even a small group would fully understand and be able to integrate all these pieces together would be far-fetched. And it certainly, if one of the objectives and the imperatives of this whole thing is to get large-scale change in a hurry, in a short period of time, what you need is buy-in. You need broad-based buy-in in this idea of the new people who are going to live in this new space. And the best way to do that is to let them participate in the design, because then they feel an engagement and an investment in the whole thing. And so, what we've thought about for a long time, I've spent, I think, easily 15 years thinking about this whole process and how we might do this thing. And what I came up with quite some time ago was the notion that we would do an kind of an enhanced or an augmented bottom-up kind of mechanism that allows the emergence and facilitates the emergence of this idea of a new world, this new world idea. And I played with that for a long time and built different kind of proposals and so on. And the basic idea that has kind of congealed here, come together, is that there would be kind of a combination of two different things. The complexity of this world is such that you have to have people who understand that complexity, and they understand it from an experiential point of view. I'm here to tell you, having done a whole lot of things in my life, that that having worked in the White House gives you a dramatically different perspective about how, say, government works and even the world works than if you haven't, because you see the inner workings of the whole thing. If you haven't ever been in the military, you don't even begin to understand from a substantive kind of way how that all works, how those decisions get made, how those kind of people kind of think. If you've never built a company from the ground up, which I've done about 6 times, then you don't know what it's obvious to me. Maybe I'm making this up, but it's obvious to me that people who are employees and have never had the responsibility of literally building a company and staying awake at night, eating your guts out, wondering how you're going to pay and generate the revenue to be able to pay the payroll by the end of the week and those kinds of things, and being forced into looking broadly at all of the moving parts associated with making an institution, an organization like that work. If you haven't done that, did you don't understand it? And there are a lot of people who are employees who think they understand it, and they have lots of opinions about it. It's a little bit about like Monday morning quarterbacking for a professional football team, and you can sit there and have all these ideas that you want, but if you haven't ever been out there on the field, then you really don't quite understand how this all works at a certain level. And so the idea is it's a requirement, therefore, I believe, is to find a small group of extraordinary, very broad thinkers who deeply are committed to this kind of emergent process, and kind of park their egos at the door. Everybody that I've talked to about this, who might be a participant in this, I've always used that phrase. You have to park your ego at the door. I talked to Ken Wilber about this years ago. He said, well, you don't want me because I can't do that. Well, in this particular case, you got to be able to work together and understand that you're building something really extraordinary. And, but you want these people who have seen across, they're not narrowly focused in one discipline like geopolitics or whatever technology, and that see across systems and see the inner workings between and among all of the component parts of a system. I've called that the Global Futures Network, and it's a group of carefully selected individuals whose job in this particular case is to kind of oversee, this kind of process from this kind of big picture point of view and this very kind of sophisticated experience, fully understanding that the experiences of the past are not going to necessarily apply directly to the future, because it's a future that's going to really be quite different. By definition, it's going to be different. It's wildly different, more different, far more different than kind of any other transition of this kind in the past. But you need some smart people to start to look at that. So we've got this core, call it a brain trust, if you will, gray beards or whatever. That doesn't work for women so well, but you get the idea. And so they would help to kind of frame and shape and integrate the pieces together. But at the same time, you need a whole lot of people all over the world. Anybody who wants to should be able to participate in this design of this new world. And there should be a mechanism whereby from wherever you are, you can throw your ideas in there and they can be considered and they can be voted on and, and shoehorned into the right place and discussed and all of those kinds of things. And that's the basis of TransitionNet, and net being network, the whole idea that there was a network across this planet designed specifically to facilitate this transition. And the network is essentially built around kind of three stovepipes, if you will. And in the center is the kind of integration kind of space, because you're going to bring in information from other kind of places and you have to help control it and so on. And you need some place in the middle where this stuff comes together and it gets integrated and it gets translated into visuals, into easily understandable kind of imagery that anybody can understand and make sense out of that and say, oh, that's the state. That's what they're talking about right now. Or I'm interested in education. And so I can go into the education part and I move this graphic. I can rotate it around and I can blow it up and I can plug in and I can navigate around. It's going to be a very sophisticated, very interesting kind of graphical interface that so that at any given time, if you come in from this side, which is the outward facing side to the public, to this website, you'll be able to plug into this thing and be able to see the present situation, the present condition, the present state of the evolution of the basic ideas for this new world. Now, let me tell you that what I believe is that on a regular basis, what you want to do is take the present state and translate that into little videos about so people can see what's life like, what does this kind of, or these ideas turn into in terms of how people live and what they do, how they act. And so it's not only conceptually and, kind of functionally how things work together, but also you can see it translated into more practical kind of ideas about what that world would look like. Now, on this side, in my mind, is the outward facing side. So this is to the public. So if you've heard about this, some other kind of thing, and you come to the website, then you can see all of this state and what's happening. And by the way, on this graphic, you can drill down in there and you can find something that you're interested in, and you can click on that and it'll tell you what the state of and what the debate maybe is. And you can click further down and it'll find the supporting documents and the links to articles and such. And so it's going to be it's kind of sophisticated way in which you can show an integrated picture of what this whole thing looks like. So you can do that if you're just coming down the street, you click on it, you heard about it. Now, if you get excited and you say, hey, I'd like to be a part of that, on this side, there will be a place where somebody you can come in and say, I want to be a part of this and be a contributor to this emergent new world. Okay. Well, that takes you over then to the other side, because the other side are all the participants. And on the participant side are essentially locally organized groups that have been put together by a self-determined leader who's interested in this, and he or she has brought together a group, a virtual group, and maybe and hopefully a physical group that are working on a particular area of interest and importance. So let's say that you live in Berlin and you've heard about this thing and you say, I want to play and I'm interested in education. And so you come in through the front door, there's a process in the middle where we introduce you and kind of vet you and say, yeah, and you got to agree to what our principles are and what we're trying to do and so on. And here's what we expect of you if you're going to be a local leader. And you say, yep, that's what I want to do. Then then we provide you with the collaborative platform, the global collaborative platform, where you can not only bring together a local group around your idea, and by local, I mean, it doesn't need to be physically local it could be extended by that for that matter, but it would be useful to be local in terms so that you could get together every once in a while and you could see each other and such. But you would have a local group that's around, say, education. And there would be, when we set this up from the center, where you're trying to build all of the basic organizing concepts. What are the values? What are the assumptions? What are the experiences that people have all gone? I mean, you got to think about this, because 5 years from now, if there's a global civil war and the United States is coming apart, to speak of this from our point of view, and other countries are otherwise the same thing, and there's been an uprising against governments everywhere, and they've started to fall, and at the same time you've gone into a cold period as you get global cooling, and you want some more complexity, the aliens show up, right? And so we kind of started the engagement with the aliens, and then there's this technology that you find out that's been done in Antarctica that changes the whole concept about energy. I mean, it just goes into crazy rapidly into amazing kind of different space. But if you've tried to decompose all of the governments around the world about the same time, and then everybody's scrambling around trying to figure out and get together, and they've all worked their way through COVID and figured out they've been lied to, and they say never again is that going to happen. Well, I mean, you're quickly into this space where there's a lot of scrambling and jockeying around to try to redo and pull together kind of a new world. Well, if that's the experience that everybody's had, then it colors the way the values and the principles and the assumptions and the objectives of what this new world is going to be like. And so that's got to be a part of this. And so you make provisions for that in terms of how this evolves from the center, and also how the groups from the outside work. But in any case, there are lots of component parts to this. I mean, if you just took it in a kind of a conventional way, you'd say, oh, well, there's technology and science and government and transportation and energy and, and all those kinds of things. Well, may not be quite like that, because you're into this new strange space. But if you took that as kind of a working kind of a basis to start with, you would say, I need groups that are thinking about each one of these different subjects, right? And so if you come in from the front door and say, I want to start a group and I'm really interested in this, you kind of give them the laundry list and you say, pick one out of these, because these are the ones that we're using as the organizing kind of framework for this new world. And so your guy in Berlin, he picks one. Maybe it's education, if that's one. And so then this person, this leader in Berlin, they go out, and however they can or want to, they build a local group. Maybe it's only a dozen or a couple of dozen people. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe they go after their friends and other kinds of things, and they get a group. And we are building the software, the platform that will allow them to collaborate, allow them to communicate to all of these people, to be able to do calendars and to organize it, and to communicate back to the center, because the center group is going to bring the information from all of these places. And so it's a rather complex kind of piece of software that we're working on. And but the folks that are out, say you're working on education in Berlin, you'd like to know who the other people are that were doing education, right? There might be some group from Albuquerque that's doing education, and you'd like to cooperate with them and trade ideas. So if your group comes up with a strange question, they can kind of throw it into the space and go back to the Albuquerque group and say, what do you think about this? We couldn't figure this out. What do you think? And so not only do you, if you're in one of the groups like Berlin doing education, can you communicate your ideas back toward the center to where they can integrate all these into the space, but also you're connected with all the other education guys all over the world that are doing that. And so that there's a cross-fertilization throughout the whole process. And the way it kind of works in notionally is that from the center, they start to get tasking. And so the folks who are kind of managing the integration say, we need this. We need this kind of notion. We need to know what the advanced technology and education is going to be like. Can you give us some ideas about that? Maybe. And so you task the education guys and they all work on it, and boom, and they send you their ideas back. And then you start to put those all together with all of the other ones. And the interesting and important part, of course, is that it's all consistent with the organizing principles. What are the values? What are the assumptions? What are the objectives? And so on. And so you get this emergent kind of process that grows up around different functional areas that are all kind of related to the central organizing ideas of what this new world is like. Now, It's all interdependent and interconnected. And so education doesn't float by itself. I got kicked out of Ken Wilber's kind of circle because he invited me with a half a dozen other people to talk about integral government one time at his house. I've stayed with him a couple of times, and we were halfway into this kind of 2-day conversation. And I said, "You guys can't do this. Government doesn't operate independently from the economy and education, and and all these other things. It's all in a connected system together, and it all floats. So it, as the water rises, as the sea rises, all the things move and going down, but they don't go like this, because they're all interconnected at some level, and you have some internal consistency. And so you have to somehow think about all of the things at the same time and try. And that's what we're trying to do here, because I don't think you can kind of take special area, isolated areas like education or legal or some other kind of thing and think about that. I mean, you'd be stupid to go out and talk about what a new legal system would look like if you had no idea about what emerging technology might be, because that stuff is just, because that then raises all kinds of things about privacy that then raise, and it just goes, it takes off, and the whole, you can't isolate anything. It's all in the end very much interconnected with other kinds of stuff. So the question then becomes, how do you do cross-fertilization across the different disciplines or the different topic areas, i.e. education or technology or whatever? And the way that we would like to do that is that we will do 2 conventions a year that will be, we'll call it transition, like Transition 21 or Transition 22 or whatever we call it. And it'll be the place where all the participants from all over the world, and we'll do 3, maybe a couple of in different places, one in Europe, one in Asia, one here. And all of the participants can come together, and they can then cross-fertilize. They can see each other, they can talk to each other, and we'll structure it so that everybody starts to get presentations from big areas that are making huge changes that are going to affect everything, and people from each discipline, from education and transportation and whatever, will stand up and say, here's what we're thinking and here's what it's doing. So everybody in the room can hear everything else. You can break up into small groups and spend some time on your specialty area and learn and work with them and so on. And we have great parties too, so that everybody has a good time. But anyway, so what you've got here, to just recap quickly, is that this is a computer platform, a network that allows people from the outside to access and see what's going on. It collects the information and is essentially a collaboration platform so that you can get a global network of people, very active people who are all participating in building this increasingly complex and integrated kind of space. You've got an outside group of kind of brain trusts, the people who are trying to look over the whole thing and say you ought to try to go here or there, and you haven't thought about that, and so on. And then also, we all get together 2 or 3 times a year, somewhere around for 2 or 3 days, and try to do cross-fertilization from a personal point of view, so everybody can see what the other people are doing. That's TransitionNet. Now, we just kind of put that on the street a week or so ago as part of our holiday kind of fundraising campaign, and said, here's what we're doing, and And if you want to be a part of this, if you want to be a founder of this kind of process, you can give us $100 and we will put you in at the beginning and you can participate, at the kind of the ground level of this thing going forward. I've gotten extraordinary kind of response from that. I've had people send me emails and said, all my life I've been waiting for this. I want to really do that. I mean, those kinds of comments. What's really interesting to me about all of this is that there are at least 2 other initiatives that are emerging right now that are trying in their own way to essentially do the same thing. Now, I don't think they're going to do it very well, and they're certainly approaching it from different kind of ways. But one of them is Simon Parks. And some of you know of who Simon Parks is. And Simon Parks is starting something called collective consciousness. And he's got groups all around that they're trying to organize and so on. And it's very appealing. And I feel very warmly about the whole thing. But my sense about it is that it's very disorganized. And I've sat in and listened in a number of Zoom meetings. And there's been no direction and no plans and no nothing. And so, if it's going to come together, it needs to really come together. But the important thing is that here it is. It's emerged. It's an idea and somebody that's trying to do this. There's Kim Goglan, I think is how you pronounce her name. She has also got a global kind of plan with assemblies and groups and structures. And she's done a lot of thinking, far more than we have, about kind of the mechanism, about how some of these kind of things work and how they interface and some of the underlying principles and so on. And so it's really quite impressive from the point of view of the maturation of how far along this all is. And I just say all of that to say that what this says to me is the time is right. Now is the time to do this. And we have this extraordinary kind of opportunity to all kind of come together and begin to in a very kind of organized and facilitated and curated, if you will, kind of a way to start to figure out what the next world is likely to be, and fully understanding that it'll evolve and it'll change as we go through the different kind of experiences that are downstream and that are coming this way. But it's something that we all can do. The technology is available that'll allow us to do that. And it's something that we really must do. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about that, and hope that all of you will choose to become a part of all of what we're doing.